Hello. Well, today we're going to show you how to use the mixing desk, or just desk in the trade, to record links and also record telephone interviews. So these are the booths. As you know, there are 3 of these, and essentially they are all the same. The one slight exception is that news booth 3 or audio booth 3 has a slightly different telephone balance unit, which we'll come back to in a moment. So I recommend, if you're going to do phone interviews, you use 2 or 3. Okay, so when you come into the booth, you may need to switch some of the equipment on. Most of the switches should be on, but if you go to the wall sockets, you need to make sure that these are also on. They may well be off, and indeed I'd ask you to switch them off at the end when you've finished recording. Then you need to make sure that you're getting power, first of all through the mini disc machine, again, which we'll come back to in just a moment, and then you can just about probably see that there's lights behind these meters here where it says left and right, and also that there are some lights on the mixing desk itself. Some of them are red, some of them are green. And what you want to make sure before you start is that the ones that say PGM, which is short for program, are selected here, 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 and here. That means that whatever you record now should happen through the desk, and then we can eventually record it onto Adobe Audition. Well, here's the computer, very obviously, and we're going to load Audition, and I should say this is a slightly different version. In fact, it's a later version, a more updated version of the program than is available in Newsroom 3. So it may look slightly different, but you still go on to Start, Programs, and then look for the Adobe Audition 3.0 as it is here, and then click that on. It may take a few seconds to load up because sometimes these reset. As before, we click yes to that. We're going to use drive D, which is the biggest drive that has the most space on the computer. That, of course, is only for this computer. It doesn't actually save the material, so we have to record here and then save it at the end onto some other device. This obviously does take a few seconds, so we'll just sing a little song, shall we, everybody? Do we know a song? And then that will load up, and as before, we want to make sure that we go into the mono or editing mode. It starts off in the multi-track mode for mixing. Now, we don't want that screen. If you remember, we then go to edit, where it says edit, and then click that edit view button, and it goes into the normal screen. Okay, so that's what it should look like. And then we can actually set up to start recording, which is File and New, 44-100, if that can be caught by the camera, I don't know. That's the default. I don't think that will alter. But what you might see change is the channels mono and stereo. This is a mono desk, so there's no point in playing anything else because we're using microphones and telephones, which are all mono. So we'll click mono, and that takes up less space as well, and then click OK. So we're now ready to record on Adobe Audition. But the question we have to ask ourselves is the machine set up to record? Is the sound card set up so that what we actually record on the computer is actually, what we put into the computer, I should say, is actually going to record? So to check that, we need to go to Start, Settings, and Control Panel. Most of you will remember doing this before. And then find Sounds and Audio Devices, then Audio, then Sound Recording, click Volume, and select Line Volume. It is already selected, but if it isn't, do make sure that is selected, because we're actually going to have a line input from the desk, actually via the mini disc machine in this case, which we use for backup, into the computer. So that already seems to be set up. However, we may need to adjust this line volume if it turns out to be incorrect, or the level is too high or too low in relation to the sound we're putting into the desk, because we have several levels of sound that all need to be correct. So I'm just going to minimize that for the moment so I can quickly come back to it if I need to, and then I'm going to get rid of those. As I mentioned, we actually record onto the computer via a mini disc. This is so that when we're doing live news bulletins, we can actually have a backup on mini disc in case there's a problem with the computer. So what actually happens, just so that you understand it in very simple terms, is that the output of the desk goes into the mini disc recorder, and then there's a line from the mini disc recorder into the computer, into the line input onto the computer. But for that to happen, the mini disc does need to be set up into record pause mode. We're not actually going to record onto mini disc, we're just, if you like, going to fool it that we're recording, but we're using it in this case purely as to then drive, if you like, the line into the computer. So you need a mini disc, and I don't know whether many of you will probably not be familiar with mini discs. They are still used widely, particularly in the BBC, but they look like this, and there should be several spare ones in the booth already. So you take it like this, and then you insert it. Don't try and jam it in if it seems to be going the wrong way. There's usually an arrow showing you the right way to insert, and then you just slot it in there, and it takes a few seconds to read the disc and tells you how many tracks are on there and how much recording time you've got left, which says actually 43, and there's a certain amount of time left, or actually there isn't much time left on this. If for any reason it says full, there shouldn't be any discs left in here which are actually needed for recording material. As I say, we do only use it as a backup. So it just means that somebody's actually recorded on the disc as opposed to putting on recorded pause. If it says disc full, press the edit/number button on here until it says erase disc, and then click yes. It'll say sure, and we confirm that by pressing yes again. So we've now got a blank disc, as indeed it says. So we can now press the record button, which says record in red, just the one time, and that is now on record and the familiar pause button. So we should now be ready to rock and roll, as they say.